Multimedia is now part of our lives. The digitalization of media and networks creates and captures the interactive age. The culture of multimedia interactivity has reached the minds of the young Filipinos. They have been acculturized through time into PlayStations, CD-ROMs, cell phones, and of course the Philippines is ranked as the top texting public. And many do net surfing in their personal computers or in the sprouting cyber cafes. The young Filipino in many places in the Philippines frequents the malls where interactive video arcades are a necessary facility. With a long tradition of Philippine cinema, television, and radio, the Filipino has been set into becoming multimedia literate.
Multimedia prior to computer technology in the 60s was a term used when you have to use different or various media like TV, overhead projector, etc. in a presentation. But with computer technology and information technology, what we have now is a convergence of all of these media into the computer, and you can access whatever type of information you want because of the random access ability of this technology.
In general, info technology here is outracing our capability and ability to cope up. No? And what I mean is that our application of technology is very slow compared to other countries. And that it is not because we cannot afford it, but that most of those in the decision process did not realize that this technology actually enhanced learning in ways we had not even seen before. No?
Multimedia is descriptive of the ability to embed pictures, images, and sound into a computer in a text document.
We live in a multimedia age, and so the moment we wake up, we consume media. You know, we read the paper, we turn on the radio, we watch TV, we use the internet for information and for entertainment, we use the telephone, we text to our friends or colleagues, so we cannot escape it.
Of all the sectors at present using this new technology, no, I think the advertising and television industry is fully using it, understandably because they are in communication and entertainment, and the use of this technology is actually a means to further commercial objectives and interests.
The Filipino public is ready to use multimedia as means of communication, tool for expression, and venue for narratives. It is important that we understand multimedia, its process, and the endless possibilities that it opens up to an artist and a communicator. We must make sure that we be able to tell our stories instead of being drowned by stories and texts solely coming from the powerful nation states. We should be able to participate in this cultural dialogue by telling our stories the way we want to tell them. We have established the presence of traditional media such as film, television, and radio as part of the Filipinos' way of life, and today, multimedia, which is the produced audio and visual text through computers, have invaded the Filipino homes. This video on multimedia production that you are watching now is the start of a three-part series. Part 1 focuses on knowing how to see, capturing the visuals through photography and digital photography and videography. Part 2 deals with generating visuals through graphics and animation. It shall likewise deal with capturing and generating audio. And the third part covers the different multimedia genres. To be able to capture the image, it is very important that we train ourselves to see our environment through the use of the camera and appreciate how this piece of equipment sees what we see. We are going to discuss how and when to make permanent the images that we want to capture. This will eventually bring us to the look of the world using the formalist tradition. This is important to introduce to you at this very early stage. To see objects, plants, trees, animals, landscapes, and even people as elements that fill up your workspace, or the frame that will carry the images that you capture. Though we are discussing form separately, it must be clear that form always goes with content or the meanings that the images create. But we must always remember that meanings rest on the individuals who perceive the images themselves, and that meanings are not innate in these images, but are influenced by the culture of those who perceive and eventually create them. As creators of these images that help create meanings in the minds of those who perceive it, we need to train ourselves to see the basic visual elements in these images. It is an added skill that every visual communicator needs. Everything that you see around us can be reduced to the visual elements. Or we can say that all that we see are composed of the visual elements. These elements are line, shape, color, texture, and pattern. You can see the curved lines produced by the branches of this tree, contrasted by the straight line produced by this lamppost. Everywhere you look, there will be straight and curved lines. And let's talk about curved lines. Curved lines vary in the effects created depending on the length and the frequency of its arc and the direction that it suggests. Thickness can also give an added effect. In discussing visual elements, let us try to deal with them individually with simple drawings to be able to see them separate from other more complex elements in our real world. Let us explore straight lines. We most often see horizontal lines in landscapes, seascapes, staircases, low buildings, and many other panoramic images. The horizontal line has been most associated with rest and stability. To seafaring people, it is linked to tranquility and calmness. The diagonal line is an action line. Its seeming uncertainty, or whether it will move up or down, or to stabilize, creates some sort of tension to the viewer. Another line is the vertical line, and it is most often associated with the concept of strength, power, and stature. However, thickness of lines can relatively alter the perception of meanings. A thick vertical line may show strength, but a thin vertical line can somehow suggest fragility. The direction of lines, if constant, may create standard meanings. However, the change in direction can create a synergy of unpredictable interpretations. Another visual element is space. It is often described as nothingness. Just like in music, silence is an element. In delivering one's speech, a pause is a blank. And when it is used prior to a word, that word is given emphasis. The pause gives emphasis to the word and eventually even the subsequent sentence. We can also look at everything as space. We can classify what we see into positive and negative spaces. To take the discussion of space a little further, one can look at space as having borders. When lines are seen on the periphery of an articulated space, a shape is created. So we can say that space enclosed by a line becomes a shape, which is another visual element. Shapes are often classified as either closed or open shapes. Open shapes are those shapes that have protrusions. Closed shapes are those that have no traces of protrusions. It has been noticed that open shapes, when put together, can easily integrate, while those closed shapes, when put together, have difficulty integrating. Another way of classifying shape is whether it is organic or geometric. Organic shapes are those that remind us of living things, such as animals, trees, leaves, plants, and the like. Geometric shape is much more reminiscent of inorganic matter, which are considered measurable and exact. Another visual element is color. Color has three main properties: value, intensity, and hue. Hue is the property of color that makes it that color. Hue identifies the color. The color wheel shows you different hues. They are classified as primary, secondary, and tertiary groups. Let us talk about colors as pigments. Let's have a quick look at the color wheel and start with the primary colors: yellow, blue, and red. They are considered as primary because they are the basic hues, and all other hues are produced by adding or mixing these colors together to produce secondary colors. Secondary colors are colors produced by combining two primary colors. When a secondary color is mixed with a primary color, we get a tertiary color. Now you can read your own color wheel as long as you remember your primary colors. When we place colors beside each other, we produce color combinations. The color wheel is the basis of color combinations. Color combinations are monochromatic, analogous, complementary, double complementary, split complementary, double split complementary, triad, and tetrad color combinations. Monochromatic color combination is the putting side by side in a working space of colors produced by using one hue and its different values. An analogous color combination is achieved by making use of the three colors that are adjacent to each other in the color wheel. Complementary color combination is the putting together of two colors opposite each other in the color wheel. A double complementary color combination is achieved by using four colors produced by two complementary colors adjacent to each other. The split complementary color combination comprises three colors. This is created by starting with one color and picking the next two colors by choosing the two colors adjacent to its direct complementary color. The double split complementary color combination has 6 colors. It makes use of two split complementary color combinations that are opposite each other in the color wheel. The triad color combination is composed of 3 colors produced by putting an equilateral triangle inside the color wheel. The colors that are pointed out by the triangle's corners constitutes the colors of the triad. And the tetrad color combination has 4 colors produced by putting a square in the middle of the color wheel. The colors that are pointed out by the square's corners comprises the colors of the tetrad. Earlier, we mentioned the word value when we talk about the monochromatic color combination. This leads us to the discussion of another property of color, which is value. You will notice that all these blues do not look alike, but they are all called blue. The difference that you see in them is what you call difference in value. Notice the gradation of blue from light to dark. With this, we can say that the property of value is referred to as the lightness and darkness of a color. What about terms like tints, tones, and shades? Are these not values? They are values, but they specifically refer to the value scale. Let us look at a value scale. The neutrals, which are white, gray, and black, as they are combined with a hue, make the tints, tones, and shades. Hue plus the whites create the tint. The hue plus the grays create tones, and the hue plus the blacks create the shade. So, when somebody says that she saw a flower that is a tint of red, she actually means pink. Or if she says it is a tint of violet, she probably means lilac. Let us now go to intensity. Intensity is the property of color that dictates the brightness and dullness of a color. The color red can vary as we know it. A usual red is already a bright color, but it can still be brighter, like the case of a scarlet red. Though we have identified these properties separately, sometimes when one property is changed, the others get affected as well. It is said that the color is the strongest of all elements. When a car passes by, the first thing you remember about it would most probably be its color. It is important to note that though we have identified the visual elements separately, all these are seen together and most often subordinate to the overall effect and the meanings that perceivers create in their minds. Produced, there is the assemblage of elements. The process and product of putting together the visual elements is what we call as visual design. Some call this process composition or design. For some who cannot separate the concept from the actual process of creation, call it realización, interaction with one's materials, or rendering. For the single frame, works like graphics and the photograph, the word rendering may be a more appropriate word. Direction, realización, and multimedia design have been relegated to works with audio-video components, and the latter is more specific to works generated by computers, with the end product being web pages and the CD-ROM. The more common principles of visual design that somehow always see its way through productions are principle of grouping. This shows that the similar objects are taken as a group, and objects that are near each other are almost always considered as a group. Similarity and proximity are the two factors that create visual grouping. Principle of separation is usually attained through the following principles. Contrast. When opposite elements are put together, contrast is created, like smooth and rough texture, black and white, complementary color combinations, warm and cool colors, straight and curved lines, or lines coming from opposite directions. The principle of figure on top of a ground deals with the perception of a figure that is on top of a background when the following one or more factors are present and working in the visual design. Enclosed area. An enclosed area will look like a figure on top of a ground. A smaller area will look like a figure on top of a ground. Textured area. Textured area will look like a figure on top of a ground. Simple pattern. Simple pattern will look like a figure on top of a ground. So will lower portion. The lower portion will look like a figure on top of a ground. Warm colors. Warm colors will look like a figure on top of a ground, specifically if it is against a cool colored background. Let's look at the factors we could consider when putting elements together. Balance is the distribution of visual weights in a given workspace or format. It can be classified as formal and informal, or symmetrical and asymmetrical. Balance can be determined by creating a vertical axis. Judith, let's show them, okay? So this is your composition. If you will put a line going down this way and you look at the weights, if the left side and the right side would be more or less weighing the same, then we call that as formal balance. Can you now put this on your left? Oh, okay. So here, if you put here an axis going down here, therefore, you will look at this now as informal or what we call as asymmetrical balance. Okay, if you look at this to a working space, look Judith, if you put here like a line going this way, and you will see that the left side and the right side match in terms of weight, then you call that formal balance. But if you put this now down here on the left side and you put a line going through the center, that is an axis, and you will see that this is a visual weight here. Now it does not have any corresponding weight over here. So therefore, that is now what we call as informal or asymmetrical balance. More specific balances are radial balance. This is when elements are led towards a focal point. Axial balance, on the other hand, is created when any one of the axes or the line that travels from end to end passing through the center of the workspace is emphasized. Occult balance is an unstructured and rather intuitive designation of visual weights in a given workspace. Another factor to consider when composing elements is harmony. Harmony is attained through similarity of elements. When there is strong similarity of elements in a given design, then harmony can be attained. Rhythm is another important factor to consider too. Rhythm is attained through the following principles. Repetition, when one motif is seen repeatedly. Alternation, where two motifs are seen in an alternate fashion. Progression, when there is a transition from smooth to rough, from small to large, or from light to dark. Continuous line movement is the continuous uninterrupted flow of elements. Being used to look at the three-dimensional world, it has always been imperative to consider principles of giving depth when working on two-dimensional formats like drawings, graphics, photographs, film and video. Principles of giving depth. These are the principles that work to take away the flatness of a space. It creates the perception of extension of space and makes the given area look deep. There are 7 principles of giving depth. Size perspective. This is when the large elements or objects are perceived to be near and the smaller objects are perceived to be far. Aerial perspective. When the clear objects look near and when the blurred objects look far. Overlap. When the objects are laid one on top of the other. The objects that are fully seen will look like it is on top and near, while the object that is most covered will look like it is farthest away. Light and shade. Darker objects will look far and the light objects will look near. Linear perspective. When all lines vanish in the horizon. There are 2 types, 1-point and 2-point perspective. Okay, being able to see and transferring these images and visual concepts into permanent, meaningful images call for the study of photography, digital photography, videography, computer graphics, and animation. Understanding these visual media is learning about still images in photography and graphics, while the inclusion of the element of movement requires the study of the filmic language in videography and animation. The use of these related principles of visual design may make your work more creative and effective.